It's the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name's Sammy James. Welcome to the show. Today we're looking back at Fulham's 3-1 victory over Brighton at Craven Cottage as the Whites move up to 6th in the Premier League table. Finally, it feels like we might be getting a league position that is reflective of some of our performances this season. We'll also look ahead to Sunday's game against Arsenal back at the Cottage. Quick successive matches in southwest London. And there's a few other Fulham talking points as ever. It's the Thursday club, but really it's the Friday club today due to Amazon Prime scheduling. Hello, Jack Collins, anyway.
Hello, Sammy. How you doing? All good?
Yeah, fine, thank you. I feel like Thursday game and then into the week, it almost feels like it's like back-to-back Fulham. I mean, I guess maybe this is early preparation for next season.
Yeah, exactly. We should start getting used to playing Thursday, Sunday, right? So it's good to get involved. I mean, look, what a wonderful evening at the Cottage in many ways, especially because at half time it was a question of can we hang on to this? And there was a lot to kind of like about that second half performance. Silva's tactical tweaks, a couple of players. I'm sure we'll come on to all of it, but it's nice to be recording here in the sunshine, which is rare in December in London, and looking at it and thinking, yeah, this weekend ahead could be pretty special. And now, I think the bonus and the Arsenal game coming up is obviously a big one, but it feels now, after 3 points on Thursday night, like we can go into that game free of pressure and actually fully have a go at Arsenal, which is exciting.
Yeah, well, enjoy that sunshine for now because Storm Dara is on the way. I feel like those storm names are getting more exotic. We had Bert a few weeks ago. Now we're on to Dara, which looks like it's about to hit the south over the weekend. So yeah, we can enjoy the blue skies for today, but yeah, clouds on the horizon in every aspect. Jack, what are your favourite 3-word reviews from last night's game?
So we had some really good ones. I enjoyed TJ with goals, gift goals, which speaks to me because I'm an alliteration enthusiast. Kieran McGinley flocked off Seagulls, which I thought was very smart. Patrick Brown had Iwobi Wonder Kenobi, which was excellent. Fulham random or random Fulham stuff. Oh, really, O'Reilly, which really made me laugh. Charlie Kipp said Brighton's bogey boys. Aussie Cottager with Agent O'Reilly activated. On that same kind of thread, Black, White and Fred said O'Reilly's debut goal, which tickled me this morning. It's Only Fulham said Iwobi rules roost. And I did enjoy Jacob Kasanov's I'm a Belabor.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, a really fun evening, Jack. I mean, we got off to the perfect start through Alex Iwobi's goal, which was gifted to us. But like thinking about it this morning, actually, Fulham tweeted. They tweeted a video of the goal, and they said forced the error. And I think that actually is right here. Like, it isn't a Southampton special where they just handed it on a plate. We did a very good press, and Bart Verbruggen didn't have an awful lot of options there. If he was making that pass, he had to get it 100% spot on. He slightly misjudged it, and that allowed Fulham the opportunity. I do believe that we deserve some credit there. It is not just a complete clanger, and we got very lucky.
100%. Also, the Fulham tweet when we scored was "Don't shoot," which is a really weird thing to say about an open goal. Like I was very confused.
No, that's Alex's thing.
What?
This is a joke about Alex Iwobi. He every time that Alex Iwobi, I don't know 100% where it's come from, but I think it's an Alex Iwobi catchphrase of "Don't shoot."
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Well, there you go. I mean, I think if you did it from a place where he'd scored from a ludicrous angle or something, that would make far more sense than when he was tapping into an empty net. But you know, it is what it is. This was a bit of a killer for me because I was still coming through the turnstiles as the crowd went up. It was a real killer. I mean, obviously the 7:30 kickoff would have thrown off a few people. I was just recording beforehand, and I sort of got there as soon as I could, and yeah, missed the opening goal. So that was incredibly frustrating. But it was what it was. And as you say, I think that you look at that press from Harry Wilson in particular. And what was interesting about this, because it obviously knocked Bart Verbruggen's confidence, because one of the reasons he was brought in to the club, he came across from Anderlecht to Brighton, is because he felt like a really good keeper with his feet, right? And it was really obvious, I think, for the rest of the game that he suddenly didn't trust his short passing game in the same way. And Fulham got a few things out of that. There was a couple of throw-ins where the ball was knocked sort of harmlessly out of play, but also just that sense of rattling a goalkeeper early on, I think probably played a part in how the rest of the game played out. So Fulham deserve immense credit, right? And look, with Southampton coming up on the horizon, we should be licking our lips about this kind of moment and the fact that Fulham can force these errors, that they will pounce on teams when they make mistakes coming out from the back. The perfect start in many ways, but equally, Alex Iwobi scored a relatively early goal against Wolves. And you're starting to think, oh, God, I really hope that doesn't happen again. And I suppose the kind of muscle memory from that. But it was interesting in that it was, I think you're right, Fulham pushing and really making that kind of hot start that we've kind of come to expect. I think not necessarily in terms of goals, but Fulham coming out the traps fast in the first half has been much more of a thing than Fulham coming out of the traps fast in the second half. It's not something we've been particularly good at after the break. But I think that the way that we've come out from games tends to be pretty impressive in that first 15 minutes or so. And we got just rewards very early on in this one.
Yeah, just to explain, the Don't Shoot was the name of Iwobi's track that he released in the summer with Tube Akpom and Medialito. So it's Don't Shoot, Sorry My Bad. So
Right.
that's why the club tweet that whenever Alex scores. I remember thinking the first time because also, against Wolves, I think they did it. And I was like, why would you say Don't Shoot? He just scored. There's your explanation. And I'm sure there's probably plenty of other people listening who are like, oh, that makes sense now.
I actually, I like his tune called "What's Love," so which he does with Speaks and Brown. So I haven't heard that one with Tuba Akpom. It might be because Tuba Akpom was on it, so I decided probably that wasn't worth my time. But the one he's actually done with Speaks and Brown, "What's Love," is a genuinely really good tune. It's a really good little bouncer. So get stuck in.
Jack, Fulham obviously took the lead, and happy days. The rest of the first half, I felt like we rode our luck quite a lot. Obviously, Bernd Leno pulled off a couple of good saves. There was a couple of real ping pong moments in the box. It felt like an inverse of the Brentford game where we just we would clear our lines, but the ball just kept coming back and back and back. I think a lot of the credit has to go to Brighton, who played very well, but we just seemed to struggle really to get a foothold. And I mean, we can definitely count ourselves very lucky to have been in the lead at half time.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's one of those kind of strange things where obviously people get frustrated with this kind of game plan and what's going on here. I think it's interesting that people obviously start to be like, why can't we keep the ball? And there is that sense of being like, I think Brighton are just playing really well. Like there is, there are some mistakes from Fulham and there are some errors in terms of clearances and not pushing the ball into the right areas and a few loose passes. But generally, it just felt like Brighton were doing things really well. And then the crowd get more and more irate, right? They get more and more wound up. And I think it's kind of intriguing in some ways how that pans out onto some decisions, because the decisions weren't going Fulham's way, right? In the first half. I don't think that's anything to hugely kind of be upset by. And it didn't feel like it was going, in any way in a kind of fair call. We didn't get the same decisions that Brighton were getting the other way, basically, is what I'm trying to get at here. But the ire that came in about some of the decisions that were correct then really made me laugh. It was like the free kick on the edge of the box. And I was like, well, that's just a foul, isn't it? Like, Wobi's just tripped him. There's nothing more you can do about that. And everyone going absolutely ballistic. I think the thing is that, that is bred from the idea that the decisions earlier on weren't in the same kind of vein and we weren't getting the same rub of the green going the other way. And we'll come on to obviously Lewis Dunk and his complaints, but the fact is that he seemed to have his hands in the back of Rodrigo Muniz with every single challenge that he made in that first half, and the referee was giving nothing. Now, that's fine if it comes back your way, and it did in this game in the second half, but at the time, it just felt like it was snowballing, right? And add to that the fact that the Brighton were piling on the pressure. There is probably an element to suggest that apart from the Bernd Leno save, which I didn't think he knew very much about, but actually looking back on the replay is an incredible stop. He really does flick out a wrist to make that stop from João Pedro, who should score. Let's be very clear.
Yeah.
But apart from that, it wasn't like Brighton created loads and loads and loads. There was a couple of very good blocks from Calvin Bassey. They had most of the ball and they were in the dangerous areas a lot of the time. But it wasn't like they were peppering the goal. And I think that's what's quite interesting about the way that Fulham shaped up in that first half. It just felt, it was like, okay, we've got the lead, not necessarily against the run of play, because you can't really have a run of play 4 minutes in. But I don't necessarily think that Fulham were expecting to take control of the game and dominate. And actually to have that lead and something to sit on, especially with a midfield that looked a little bit more defensively susceptible than perhaps usual, I think that we did quite a good job of keeping Brighton at vaguely at arm's length.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, they had 3 shots on target in the entire game. So I don't think you can actually look back at this one and be like, oh, it was an absolute, you know,
smash and grab. It wasn't a smash and grab.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. That was the phrase I was looking for. Yeah, it wasn't a smash and grab. I think Brighton were on top. It's interesting you talk about those decisions, because I think the one for me, if you mentioned that trip, but I think Brighton won a corner, and I think the ball that thundered off Sanderberg. Like, it was just so off Sanderberg. And like the Hammersmith end behind me was absolutely livid, as if it should have been a goal kick. And my dad and I were looking at each other like, are we the blind ones here? Like, did that not just like absolutely thunder off Sanderberg's midriff? Like, surely, and I think you're right that I think the early bad decisions from the referee just turned into just anything he did, unless it was a decision for Fulham, was then something that was met with kind of an irate reaction from the crowd.
Howls of anguish.
Yeah, I mean, weirdly, it's like we saw out the first half, which saw so much danger, and then Brighton score a goal from nothing, almost. I mean, it is just an incredible goal from Belieber, and the flick from João Pedro, I think, is actually what really makes it, because Belieber doesn't always have to break stride in order to hit it into the bottom corner. Is it harsh to say Leno? I don't know. I don't think he should have saved it. It rolled in quite slowly, but it is a good strike.
I think it's just a really well-placed strike, really well-controlled, considering, as you say, he doesn't break stride. It's not the hardest strike in the world. And it's funny because actually, if you watch back the highlights on the Sky Sports YouTube channel, like the commentator shouts like, and the power from Pereira, and then like obviously has to backtrack quite quickly as soon as he sees the replay, and he's like, yeah, he's more guided it into the corner, actually. And you're like... I mean, it's a really, really clean strike, and it's very well controlled, considering, as you say, he's moving. But I don't think you can really put it at Bernd Leno's door. Like, I think that it's just a well taken. Also, it's quick and first time, and it probably catches him a tad off guard. Like, there's a lot going on. He's a fair way out, right? And so I think it is just one of those where a bit of a snapshot that he is sort of gone past him before he's really had time to react. The one I would probably question is Robinson losing the ball in the build-up. If there's any way you can lay blame for that goal, but there's a lot that happens after that. And as you say, the touch from João Pedro is sublime, right? It's a really, really well-worked goal. And if we had scored that, we'd be purring. So there has to be a kind of level of looking at it objectively. And I know it's easier to do that once you've won a game 3-1. So I'm not saying that we'd be sitting here the same if we'd lost the game 2-1. But I think sometimes you just have to stand back and be like, that's a cracking strike. That's a really, really good strike.
Yeah, I mean, João Pedro is a lot faster than I ever kind of gave him credit for. He did cause us a lot of problems in this game, particularly getting around the back of Calvin Bassey, I felt like. I rarely see Bassey rattled, but I think genuinely Bassey came out of that game, probably delighted that we won, but probably feeling like, I could definitely wait a few months before facing him again.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of his tougher battles. I still thought he acquitted himself well. And actually, it was interesting that he often switched sides and kind of went down between the centre-back and the full-back on either side of the defence, which was, I think, an important kind of thing for them to be able to vary up their game, especially considering where the wing-backs were playing in that first half. They needed someone that was going to kind of strafe across the penalty box to occupy both centre-backs. And I thought he did it really well. He's a really, really lovely player. And yes, he should score in the first half with that chance, but he is a very, very well-rounded footballer who does a lot of different things really well. And we sat here and praised Matheus Cunha the other week after the Wolves defeat. And we were like, sometimes you come up against a player in form. I think João Pedro is a better player than Matheus Cunha. I think he has more to his game. I think he has more strings to his bow. And also, I think he has further room to grow. And if you were giving me a chance one-on-one keeper, I would give it to João Pedro every time. Because I feel like Cunha has the spectacular in his locker, but actually, you come to those chances that are actually a little bit easier, and often those are the chances that don't necessarily go in. Whereas I think João Pedro is has a little bit more regularity. And I was surprised that he didn't score in the first half. If Matheus Cunha had done the exact thing that João Pedro had done in that first half, I wouldn't have been shocked whatsoever. I was a bit stunned that João Pedro hadn't scored, which I think probably speaks to, how good and how consistent he's been for this Brighton side. He's a very, very good player, and he did cause us a lot of headaches.
Yeah. I must admit, like, if you had someone, like, if we had João Pedro up front, I mean, what could Fulham actually achieve? Because, I mean, we all know that probably number 9 is the issue. Although Rodrigo Muniz did have a good game last night. And actually, it's so weird in both the case of Rodrigo and Raul is that I like them both starting. I don't like either of them off the bench. This isn't new. I mean, I think Raul actually came on and did okay last night from the subs bench. But Rodrigo Muniz it's particularly noticeable that I just think he battles and scraps so well up front. I mean, there's a pass he did in the second half to Reiss Nelson that was absolutely outrageous. Nelson should have done a little bit better. We should actually touch on him in a second. But yeah, I thought that Muniz, I thought it was good. I still think that there is ultimately a problem there in terms of like goal output. And that is ultimately what I think is going to mean that long term, neither Rodrigo Muniz or Raul Jimenez are our strikers, because as good as Muniz's whole play is and he is tenacious in there, I ultimately think that someone with the goal record that he is showing won't be here long term. But I was pleased last night to see him get a start and actually perform pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's quite a difficult one to work out because, after the Wolves game, I sat here and I slated Rodrigo Muniz. I thought it was one of the worst cameos I've ever seen in a Fulham shirt. Like, I couldn't express how bad I thought he was in that game. And me and my brother were talking about this last night because yesterday he was excellent, right? In lots of different ways. He still has an errant, a wayward pass in his locker. And in the first half, there's a moment where he wins the ball brilliantly. He chips it over a player. And then he tries to play this diagonal that sets Harry Wilson in, and it just sails over Wilson's head and out of play. And you're like, yeah, I mean, that's Rodrigo Muniz in a nutshell, isn't it? He's done all the hard stuff. It's just to execute the pass, Rodrigo. But he should be a good impact sub. Everything about his game suggests that he should be a good impact sub. And it's not like he warms up into games when he starts, right? It's not like from the first whistle, he doesn't get going. It takes him 10, 15 minutes. When Rodrigo Muniz starts games, he starts games pretty hot, right? So you're kind of looking at it and thinking, well, why is that? Because Raul, I can understand not having a gigantic impact off the bench. Raul is a player who is very cultured. A lot of it that you see from him is those kind of neat flicks and tricks. And I can see why that doesn't necessarily translate to coming off the bench. Rodrigo Muniz is all limbs. Like, he should be the perfect impact sub in so many ways. He should be able to come on and throw his body around and frustrate defenders and get in the way. And all of the things he does well when he starts games don't require like the amount of warm up or getting used to the game state in the way that Raul's do. And I just don't understand why he cannot fulfill that role in any sort of capacity. It doesn't make any sense, like from a logical or a footballing perspective. But look, credit where it's due. He was excellent last night, I thought. And especially in the first half where Fulham really struggled, as we say, with that out ball. I thought his ability to, scrap and tussle just bought us a couple of extra seconds at times to do things. And honestly, it was his hold-up play and potential sort of flicks over the top. I just mentioned that Wilson one, which is very him. But that was our best opportunities. They were the best moments we had in terms of breaking onto this Brighton back line and trying to catch them out in transition. A lot of that was due to his hard work off the ball and his ability to battle up top for things. So I wanted to give him credit because I've given him criticism this season for a variety of different things. And I did think he was good last night.
This episode of Fulhamish is brought to you by NordVPN, which is the tool I use to watch all the festive football by changing the location of either my tablet, my laptop, or my phone. It is particularly perfect for those 3 p.m. kickoffs which aren't available here in the UK. All you need to do is go to NordVPN, change the location of your laptop or whatever device you're using, and then you can access platforms which are not only much cheaper than those here in the UK, they also show all the games, unlike what we have where we only get a fraction of them. It means that I can watch every single Fulham game, whether it's on the telly or not. I also use NordVPN in order to access cheaper flights and hotels, as quite often, switch your location and you'll find those become a bit less expensive as well. You can use NordVPN on up to 10 devices, so I share my login with friends, family and colleagues. And right now you can get a great deal by going to nordvpn.com/Fulhamish. Not only will you get to access a great rate, but you get 4 extra months as well, and it's completely risk-free thanks to Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. So to get that great rate plus 4 extra months, go to nordvpn.com/Fulhamish. That's nordvpn.com/Fulhamish.
Now, Jack, you dreamt for years of seeing Matt O'Reilly score at the Hammersmith End.
Did.
I'm not 100% sure last night was quite how you or most Fulham fans were envisioning. It's no goal. It's unfortunate. It's Matt O'Reilly, which is not funny. I mean, it's always it's just a weird quirk, isn't it? It just happened to be Matt O'Reilly's backside that put the ball in the back of the net. But the controversial thing about this goal was the alleged push by Issa Diop, I think it was, on Lewis Dunk. He was absolutely livid with this. Went over to the referee and did a very chippy post-match interview with the brilliant Faye Carruthers on Amazon, which seemed unnecessarily attacking on Faye. She was asking the question, "Why were you upset?" And he did the kind of almost.
I think it's really obvious I'm upset.
Shut up. And it's like, well, I'm just asking you why. It's not. I'm not here anyway. I think that maybe it's quite weird because you see the replay being shown as this interview is happening, and you can quite clearly see Lewis Dunk pushing Rodrigo Muniz. So not 100% sure that this is a clear-cut case as he thinks.
It is a really, really bizarre hill to die on. Look, I appreciate that you're upset and you've lost a game, but without going back and having a look at that, are you sure this is where you want to plant your flag? It doesn't matter. In so many ways. One, you're massive. And it's if there is a push, there is a slight push, and he can have that. But if they had a goal disallowed at the other end for that, he would be going absolutely ballistic, ballistic if that was ruled out. And I think you kind of come to that point, especially considering, as I say, he spent the first half basically inside Rodrigo Muniz. It was kind of one of those moments where you look at it and you think, well, in the halfway line, he's going mad when Fulham got a free kick in the first half for coming through the back of Muniz and being kind of all over him as he's trying to head the ball. And he's going ballistic. That's more of a foul than anything that happened in the Fulham box. And as you say, he was the one sort of tussling with Muniz in the first place. So it's really, really weird. He is vaguely funny that Matt O'Reilly scored. Maybe Scott Parker was right all along. Maybe he's one of our own.
Maybe. Poor old Matt. He looked absolutely dejected, obviously. And I really want Matt to succeed because we should have given him the opportunity, but I was very happy to see that go in the back of the net. Alex Iwobi then made it 3. He was exceptional last night. And hey, the 10 assists, 10 goals, Jack Collins prediction for Alex Iwobi, you might be on. I'm just quickly I don't know.
It's 5 and 4. 5 goals, 4 assists.
You could be onto something. We're not halfway through the season.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think that we'll see. We'll see. I don't know how many cup games he's going to get because he's been kind of run into the ground in terms of the Premier League. So we'll see what kind of that looks like and how strong Silva goes in the FA Cup and all of those things. But yeah, I mean, it's at the moment, it feels like a decent prediction. I'm quite pleased with it. My other prediction was obviously that we're going to beat Chelsea at the Bridge on Boxing Day. So if both of those two came through, Jack would be a very happy boy. That would make me very pleased. So that's what I'm looking for. 10 and 10 from Wobes and a win at the Bridge. And, the rest of the season's kind of a shrug then. I'd be really happy. That'll do me. Thank you very much. I think... what we saw from him yesterday was exceptional. And I think it was Cam Ramsey that tweeted saying MVP, which I think is a really kind of statement piece. I think that he has been our player of the season so far by quite some distance, I would probably argue. He's been absolutely exceptional pretty much the entire season. And that second goal, or his second goal, is so Willian that it's almost not worth breathing. you could put Willian in that situation, have him do the exact same touches, and no one would bat an eyelid. It is one of those moments. And considering he wasn't playing in that position, to have taken up that role and actually been that creative juice from that side. And he's done this a lot this season. Obviously, he's played in about 4 different positions and he's been brilliant in all of them. But when he does have that ability to sort of drift off that left-hand side, whether that is as a winger or as a kind of attacking 8, he's just been absolutely sensational. Some of the touches he puts together, there's a moment in the second half where he just sort of like just bamboozles about 4 defenders in the middle and just wanders away with the ball. And you're thinking, can anybody stop this guy when he's in this kind of form? In this kind of form, he gets in any squad in the Premier League. Maybe not in every starting 11, but he gets in any squad in the Premier League. And I love him so much. I tweeted yesterday that I think he might be my favourite player since Steph Johansson. And I'm really, really pleased. I love him so much. He makes me so happy.
And the fact that he can play every position, he's fully taken on the Bobby Decordova-Reid mantle. I mean, he's not yet played right back, so he's not Bobby Decordova-Reid just yet. But I wouldn't put it past him. An injury crisis, Kenny Tete, Timmy Castagna are out. I think Alex Iwobi would be the first.
He basically played right wing back against City, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, or maybe he's done it kind of already. I feel like Bobby did a bit more of a shift at right back. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely taken on that mantle. There was obviously that This Will Catch On from a little while ago where someone did We All Dream of a Team. I know We All Love Bobby Decordova-Reid, and it was to the Yellow Submarine. It was like he makes the tea, he drives the bus. Maybe we need that remade for Alex Iwobi. Just a quick mention for Reiss Nelson. A weird game for him last night. And just generally, I mean, he's not going to be available for the Arsenal game, even if he wasn't injured, which it looks like he did pull up with a hamstring injury. I think he was about to come off the pitch, which Marco mentioned after the game, which is obviously incredibly frustrating for Marco. It's literally a minute earlier, and that would have all been sorted. But I can't quite put my finger on him. He is electric. There's absolutely no doubt about it. He's a box of tricks. I still love the back thing he did against Spurs. But you saw that moment last night where he went through one-on-one with the keeper and he opted to take another 3 or 4 touches rather than just take the shooting opportunity that was there. I just worry about his end product. Part of me is like, maybe this will come, maybe it'll all click for him. But like, I feel like he's had enough chances now where, you know, he's had enough games where he should be taking opportunities like that. And you just worry with a player like that. I guess Harry Wilson's been guilty of a bit of that in the past, of just like slightly overplaying.
Yeah, I mean, also, I've got a real feeling about this, and it's a strange one, and it's complete theory, so feel free to shoot me down. But obviously the rain is sheeting down, right? And Reiss Nelson is the kind of player, I think, who likes to really have his man on toast. He really, really likes to get past a player, to skin him, to make them feel like they've been done in the cage at 5-a-side. I think he wants a player to slide across in front of him. Like, I legitimately think he thinks a defender is going to come sliding past him if he stops the ball. And unfortunately, they win the ball, right? But I genuinely think that's what he's trying to do. Like, the optics of a player sliding past you before you curl it into the corner are absolutely sublime. It's like goal of the month kind of stuff. So I wonder if that's just playing into it. But you're right. And it's interesting kind of keeping an eye on him because he starts games really hot. Again, another one who seems to be excellent first half, and he does seem to tail off as games go on. And obviously that's natural. He's playing for 60 minutes in the rain. It's cold. It's rubbish. And he's had to work incredibly hard defensively as well as going forward. So there are moments in the second half you're like, go on, take on your man. That's what you want to do. Like, that's what your game is based around. And he felt a little bit kind of static, I think, in that second half, especially just before the injury and just before he was substituted. I think we can take a little bit of heart in the fact that he walked off the pitch. Yeah. Like, obviously, if you're, because at first when he went, I was like, oh, remember Michael Owen's hamstring against Leeds all those years back? And the like image of him like almost going down like he'd been shot, because that was the kind of same movement that Nelson did as he went down. I was like, oh God, that could be a proper hamstring go. But the fact that he got up and walked off, I think suggests it's probably a minor tear or a strain rather than a full kind of 6 months out. That could be maybe 6 weeks. It's still not ideal, but it does give you a little bit more kind of sense, I think, that he might just be about okay just after the new year, probably. So fingers crossed, and hope it's not that serious, and hope the recovery starts well. I'm with you in terms of his end product, and I think that, you know, that's probably something that you have to bear in mind. He scored quite a lot of goals when he was at Feyenoord, but playing off the other flank, which I think is quite interesting in terms of where his shooting angles are coming from, right? Because he's really wanted to play down that left-hand side for Fulham, and it's been kind of the role that Silva's envisaged for him. But a lot of those chances that he scored for Feyenoord are him on the right-hand side cutting across goal and striking across the ball. So, look, he's a player who, again, it's another one. We know that he can beat a man. We know that he has that ability. He's been quite rusty for a while in terms of game time, and obviously he's starting to get a rhythm of games, or was before this injury. And I think that those kind of natural instincts will come back to him as he plays more regularly. So I'd hold out hope there. I just wonder if it's going to come too late for Fulham in terms of he might find that goal scoring instinct in April. By that time, we've got a month left of him. So we'll see how we go.
Interesting comments from Marco after the game about the fans. Jack Kelly was in the post-match press conference and got this from Silva. Said, the fans have been great since I joined the club. When they equalised, everyone was down. Craven Cottage was down. I heard much more from the away fans in that moment. That is the moment where we really need them. I'm asking them for more support. And there was another kind of supporter thing that I noticed in the latest Fulham Supporters Trust notes, where Marco has specifically said that he has been asking for the ground to be fuller, particularly the Riverside stand. And I think he's been frustrated with the efforts. I find this kind of surprising from Marco. I mean, there is an element of like Craven Cottage can get a little bit flat. And there was a couple of moments last night where definitely I think Brighton were the louder, but for a long part of it, and Fulham has always been quite reactive. You know, when it's going well, I think we are well, and sometimes maybe when things are down, the Fulham crowd kind of goes into their shell. But it's interesting this from Marco. I found it quite surprising for him to kind of call out the fans in such a way.
I'm yet to hear a game where the opposition score and the immediate aftermath isn't the away fans louder than the home fans. That's what happens. That's how grounds work. I imagine he's talking about that kind of swell of, you know, kind of come on, let's get behind them again. That often happens at Fulham. And I don't know. I think there is an element here of being like, look, I absolutely appreciate what Marco's saying, and it was a little bit flat at times last night. That's fine, right? It's a Thursday night. It's an early kickoff. It's been shifted around for TV revenues and rights and all of those things. A lot of people won't have been, you know, there in their right, you know, or struggle to get there on time, or come straight from work. It's a different atmosphere to what you normally would get necessarily on a weekend, for example. And it's perfectly reasonable to be like, we need you on Sunday because we're playing Arsenal and we really need the fans to be there, and they will be, right? Because it's a massive game at home against a team that think that, you know, that are in the title race and are battling. And I think that people will naturally be up for that game. It's obviously when things get shifted around that it becomes a little bit harder. If you've come straight from the office and, you know, you haven't had time to have a couple of pre-match looseners or whatever those things are, then it's obviously much harder to get kind of really, really bang up for things in the same way. So I can understand it. Equally, like I would probably posit to Marco that I know he can't dominate every game, and I've praised his adaptability in games so far. But if you're at home and you're being, you know, pretty much played off the park from a kind of possession standpoint, where you don't get any of the ball and it keeps coming back at you towards the home end, etc., in the first half, that's quite a hard thing to lift a crowd. Like, it's not one of those moments where if you get ball and you get break, and even if you're playing like that and you get those transitions, then obviously people can get a little bit excited about it. But that didn't really happen for Fulham in the first half. So if you want to get the crowd on side, you have to try and, you know, be able to play your way out. And look, I've said here that Brighton were really good in that first half, and Marco made some really smart tactical tweaks at half time in order to stop us being overloaded in certain areas, and he deserves immense credit for that. But equally, it takes a few minutes to see things, and then Brighton score off the back of what felt like a sustained pressure period in the first half where Fulham really didn't create very much at all. Like, obviously that's going to be harder to rouse a crowd from than if you are, you know, if you're basically winning a game or you're battering a game and you concede, you know, against the run of play, for example. obviously it's easier to get back into be like, it's okay, we're winning, we're going to dominate this. At that moment, that wasn't the case in the game. And I think that the crowd grew into it as Fulham started to respond.
Yeah, I mean, look, it is a tough one. I think you're right on the whole 7:30. The ground wasn't full last night, and not just the Riverside. I can see Marco's frustration, particularly with the Riverside stand as well. It is taking so long and those large empty gaps. Everyone understands the reasons behind them. It's the corporate sections that aren't ready yet. They can't sell the seats. They haven't got the license, yada, yada, yada. I think if you're Marco, he's here building a great team, and he must just be like, how long is this bloody thing taking? And because that's the atmosphere he probably notices most, obviously, because that's where the dugout is. And I can understand it's frustrating. Speaking also of fans and reactions last night, Andreas Pereira, he was booed by a few people in the Hammersmith end as he warmed up on the touchline towards the Hammersmith end in the first half. And then again, a very mixed reaction as he got substituted on. I actually went for a quick toilet break at this moment, and I could only hear what I heard from the Hammersmith end bogs. But I did definitely hear some boos.
Yeah.
I mean, look, it doesn't, I don't think anyone's going to be massively surprised to hear us say that, like, I don't think booing helps. I've seen some debates on Twitter where some people are like, Sharp will boo if we want. He disrespected the club. I kind of understand those viewpoints. I do get it, but I don't know. It is. I found it a bit disheartening. I was just like, oh, come on. But
look, I think again, do what you want. Like, I'm not here to tell you how to support your football team. Like, you can support your team however you like. But I would probably posit that considering the reaction for Andreas, and look, he has, he's upset a few people, and I think, look, it's probably been slightly taken out of context, but I don't think it's been taken out of context enough to justify, what he was saying in the first place, right? I think it's probably been made out to be worse than it is, but it's still not great, right? The two things aren't, mutually exclusive. My issue is that Adama Traore comes on at the same time. He gets a roar like he's Simon Morgan. You don't think the first playing out of his Adama Traore will be on it? Because I think he would. Like, it's not going to one of those. And, Emil Smith-Rowe, who was completely and utterly anonymous last night. Can we just be complete straight up? And it was funny because I'm not going to name any names, but, there's a great group of people around me at Fulham, and we have, we have a good chat and a good laugh. And whereas a certain fella behind me who hates Andreas, can't stand him, not because of this, just like doesn't like him on the pitch. And he spent the entire game talking about the fact that Smith-Rowe wasn't doing any pressing and that there was no dynamism in our 10 slot. And I turned around and I was like, are you listening to yourself? I was like, I tell you who could do that. There's a number 18 and he's sitting on the bench. Like, it was like one of those moments where Smith-Rowe was anonymous last night, right? And that's fine. He's going to have on and off games. I don't think Emil Smith-Rowe is the man for, one, those kind of conditions, and two, a game like that where Fulham aren't going to have loads of the ball, right? He doesn't seem to suit his output in terms of what he's looking for. Smith-Rowe is a brilliant on-ball footballer. He's not a great off-the-ball footballer, although, you kind of take those when you get it. When he has the ball and he's at feet, he's probably Fulham's best player, bar Alex Iwobi. When he doesn't have the ball, he's missing. And I don't think it's sacrilegious to say that. Like, you can praise a player for what he does on the ball and criticize him for what he does off it. In the same way that I can praise Andreas Pereira for what he does off the ball without always being enamored of what he does on it, right? And I think in a game like that, you want your number 10 to be a workhorse. You want to be snapping into challenges. You want to be making things happen. And that, I think, is what Andreas brings to the team. And you know what I thought was really brave? He came out to the Hammersmith end at the end of the game. And look, maybe he wouldn't have done that if we'd lost. Let's not beat around the bush. But he was the last one there with Bernd Leno and Calvin Bassey. And you said it on Quick Take, but there was some sort of altercation, it looks like, with someone in the Riverside stand who said something, and, it seemed to rile him up. And he spent a good couple of minutes with Calvin Bassey pointing into the Riverside stand where it happened after the game was over, that I thought was interesting. I would also say this to Andreas, though. If you can't take flack from the Riverside stand, I really wouldn't move to Marseille. Like, that really ain't it. Like, if the Riverside stand are rattling you, you've got no chance at the Velodrome. Like, none at all. 0, 0, blank. Stay here. So look, people are, again, entitled to do what they want. I'm with you. I don't think it helps. I thought he was exactly what the game needed. I thought he did really well when he came on as well. And I think that, basically there is a level to this. You'd be like, yes, okay. I take the fact that Andreas has said comments in this week that have upset people, and fine, right? Rightly so. Andreas has also put 2 years of absolutely solid graft into this football team, right? He's never shirked. He's always been there to kind of fight for it. He fights every time he's on the pitch. You never see Andreas, go missing from a kind of work rate standpoint, right? I think that earns you some credit in the bank. And to be honest, Andreas should have far more credit in the bank than someone like Emil Smith-Rowe does right now. And, it wasn't like Emil Smith-Rowe came to Fulham being like, I really want to join this club. I'm desperate to join this club. It was because there was no future at Arsenal. There is a level to this where we have to accept that there are places in the food chain, and that, how many Fulham fans are in this Fulham squad? One, right? One. Okay. Ryan Sessegnon. Last year, they did a big article about this in The Athletic, and it was like, working out how many fans from each club are in the squad. And like Fulham were there at the bottom with nil.
I argue that Tom Kearney might now be a Fulham fan. Like, I think when he retires, he'll keep on being around Fulham and being a Fulham person, and like a bit like Carragher used to support Everton, but now it supports Liverpool. So maybe two. But yeah, no, you make a great point. And I think the thing for me about Andreas is like, look, I think Andreas was starting to get negativity and boos before what happened in the press. And that's for me where I'm a little uncomfortable about it, because I do think that like there should never be criticism because of just like they're not being great on the ball or performing that well. That for me, I think, is where I draw my line. Now, if you were completely like supporting Andreas 100% and actually it's just the comments in the press that have angered you, that I can kind of understand more. But I just that it feels tinged. Like if Andreas had been performing 10 out of 10 this season, but he then still made those comments, what would the reaction be? Now, I think that some people would have gone, actually, no, still, I don't care how well you play. You say those things in the press and you'll hear what I think about it. But I think it's also tinged with him dropping quite a few kind of 4 out of 10s this year that like have also got people frustrated with him. So yeah, it is a tough one, and it is weird. I still find it quite weird that he's like made such a rod for his own back for a move to Marseille. It isn't Real Madrid or Barcelona. But
no, it's not.
It is what it is. It's European football, I guess, but like that's it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one, and I think it's just one of those bizarre eventualities in football where it was probably mooted and there was probably some sort of agreement or something in place that obviously then fell through because Fulham decided they didn't want to sell. Also, he would have watched Emil Smith-Rowe come in his position, right? Like there is also a sense that if you're at work and they sign someone and they bring in a big name from another company who is doing the exact same role as you and starts to take over your projects, you're going to be a bit like, oh, well, that was my gig. Like I've been doing quite well, I thought, right?
Yeah.
Like I know it's not exactly the same as an analogy, but like there is reason for Andreas to feel a little bit disgruntled given that he has been doing well in that exact role and has now been shifted around to accommodate the shiny new toy. Like I can understand why a player might be a little bit upset about the fact that those things have happened. That's not to say that you should throw your toys out the pram and give an interview like this, because you shouldn't. But the idea that you might leave because someone has come in and basically taken your position off you isn't a new one in football.
No. All right, we'll take a break there. Afterwards, we'll look ahead to Arsenal on Sunday. Part 2 of the Fulhamish podcast. It is Sammy here with Jack Collins on the newly named Friday Club. If you're heading to the game on Sunday, make sure you pop into Craft Beer Co. at Hammersmith Station, a family-run business that has a wonderful selection of interesting beers and ales from all around the world and from the UK as well. Perfect place for a pre or post match tipple. It is right in Hammersmith Broadway near the tube station. And yeah, make sure you check it out this Sunday. Jack, then Arsenal. Obviously, this was probably our best game last year was the Arsenal at home. You could argue that Spurs was up there and maybe United away, but I think for me, in terms of an impressive result, I think this was it last year, especially to go 1-0 down and then turn it around with pretty much all of the Arsenal big guns in the lineup. It feels like actually Fulham have timed a lot of games well against sides this season. I think we faced City at not a bad time, and we faced Spurs at a good time. This doesn't, though, feel like a good time to face Arsenal because they've got their mojo back. Martin Odegaard is absolutely bossing, and I feel like right now they are actually the form team in the league. Obviously, Liverpool getting a lot of attention, rightly so, but right now it feels like Arsenal have the most momentum. So yeah, this is not the time to face the Gunners.
No, they're playing with a freedom, which I think is really interesting because for the last couple of years, obviously being in these title tussles with City and it kind of not going their way, obviously, but especially towards the back end of seasons, I think every game has felt a bit like a final for Arsenal and the pressure ratchets up. So I actually think that Liverpool taking a big lead out in front of them and Martin Odegaard coming back at that point and immediately and seamlessly becoming the best player in this team again has really kind of relieved a lot of the pressure in that they're kind of just playing at the moment and kind of swatting teams aside with a real nonchalance. If they can't play through you, they'll bang them in from a corner. So it's kind of interesting seeing how they are. And look, they're not the prettiest side in the world sometimes. And when they are faced with a stout defensive unit, they have at times struggled to break them down. I think you can look at that Manchester United game in midweek for an example. But they found a way. They've been quietly efficient, I think, as well as everything else, Arsenal. And when you're kind of looking at that as a combination, yes, they can tear you apart in open play if you start to get those combinations with Saka and Odegaard and you're in Timber flying down that flank in place of Ben White, and down the left, that Calafiori and Martinelli link has been really smart, and I think it's freed up the Brazilian to do some nice things. There's a lot to like about this Arsenal side, kind of from a footballing perspective, shall we say. But if they can't pretty their way through you, they will bash their way through you from a corner. And that, I think, is proving to be that two-headed monster that I often talk about with Liverpool in a slightly different way. But they've been very sharp, very smart. I was on Inside Gooners yesterday with their brilliant Clive Palmer and Julien Laurent, and they were asking me about this game, and I was like, look, well, I don't know where we stand when it comes to it, because Clive was saying, look, last year we went to the Cottage and you fully deserved the 3 points. We took that early lead. You came back at us. You deserved the 2 goals. You were the better side, and you played us off the park in some regards. And I was like, yeah, I mean, it's how I remember it as well. But often opposition fans don't look at things exactly the same. So it was nice to hear that from an Arsenal fan. And so they were all sitting there, and Harry Simia was on it as well. And they were like, I'm really nervous. I'm more nervous about this game than I was about the Manchester United game at home. Like, these are the games that Arsenal need to go and prove that they're worth in terms of, can we go and challenge to win the league? These are real tests. And one of the questions was, this was a tough week. And obviously it was before the Brighton game. They were like, you got a point from Spurs. What would you have taken before the week or the 8 days Spurs, Brighton, Arsenal began? And I said, I'd have taken 4. That would be nice. 4 would be great. Yeah. And so obviously you get to that point, you're like, again, for Fulham, now that win is secure, now that there is a little bit of a gap put up again between some of the sides chasing Europe, obviously you come into this game with a bit of a freedom. And the question, I think, then becomes, 1, who plays? Because 2, if the conditions are, as you say, with the Storm coming in, as nasty as they're predicted to be, do you want an 11 that's going to just hassle and harry and absolutely get in Arsenal's faces? And 2, how are the ex-Arsenal boys going to fare against their former club? Now, I have no doubts about Alex Iwobi, Bernd Leno, etc. But I do, and I think have reasonable doubt about how Emil Smith-Rowe is going to feel ahead of this game. Not only because he had a poor performance on Thursday night, but I think in a way that we haven't really seen with any of the other Arsenal lads that have come in, he is still absolutely emotionally treasured by the fan base. And we saw this when he joined, right? All of the comments on loads of our videos, etc., were people saying, I'm going to keep an eye on Fulham as our second club, love Smith-Rowe, keep an eye on him, look after him. And we have, what it's worth. But there is now a sense of kind of when you're feeling that much affection and that much love from a fan base, how do you react to having to play against them? And I think that can go one of 2 ways. And I don't know which way it's going to go.
I do think that if you are Smith Rowe, as much as you'll enjoy the love, there's got to be a point to prove. There's got to be. Like, actually, more surely it's the other motivation. Like, this club didn't give you the opportunity that you felt like you deserved. Like, yes, okay, the fans love you and, no one's got a bad word to say about you. But Mikel Arteta didn't love you because he would have played you more if he did. Like, that's ultimately the honest truth. And so I think if you're Emil Smith Rowe, that's the motivation from Marco. Like, go out, they all still sing your name and wish you were probably in this squad and stuff. But like, ultimately, this is the game to prove that actually it was a mistake to sell you. And like, that's what Cole Palmer's done to Man City massively in spades. And that's what Emil Smith Rowe needs to do. Especially if he wants to break into England and stuff. These are the kind of games where Smith Rowe needs to perform against the big boys. It's all well and good, putting a good performance in against Leicester City. But actually, it's these top 4, top 6 games at home at Craven Cottage. It's a nice pitch. Like, okay, yeah, it might be a bit rainy, but he's not. I'm trying to think who's the player. Oh, he's not John Mikel Seri, who can't play in the cold. Like, this is the moment, I think, for Smith Rowe. In terms of Fulham's lineup here, Jack, interesting to know exactly what Marco does, because he made a few changes against Brighton. I'm just trying to work through it now. Obviously, you got Leno Robinson, Bassi, Diop. I think Joachim Andersen might be returning to fitness, but he's not going to be ready for Sunday. Tete Castagna? Yeah, Tete back.
I think Castagna was given a run out in midweek because Kenny Tete will play at the weekend. And he's played a lot of minutes, right? And I think that's a Marco Silva. I still have faith in you. You just currently don't have the shirt, I think, is probably what I would take from that as a game. So I think it will be Kenny Tete at right back.
Yeah, and also I feel like Tete and Robinson have really had the number of Saka and Martinelli in recent matches. I think like they've been kept so.
You've just cursed us so hard.
I haven't cursed us. I'm just saying what's happened before. It might not work this time, but they have. You'd imagine Berger and Lukic back in the midfield, with Lukic obviously returning from suspension. Do you think it's now and then Smith Rowe in the 10? I mean, surely there's no doubt about that. And Iwobi maybe. Well, where does Iwobi fit in? Because we need a winger. Is it Harry Wilson or is it Adama Traore?
I think he'll take Reiss Nelson's spot, right? I think Iwobi takes Reiss Nelson's spot because one, he'd be ineligible to play anyway, and I think Harry Wilson keeps his spot. I thought Harry Wilson was excellent last night. Thought he hassled and harried really well. I thought he worked incredibly hard. I think he did everything he needed to keep his spot in this team for what it's worth for me. So I think that you will keep Adama as an impact sub. The only question mark I genuinely think is, obviously it's a slightly different scenario in that it's not away from home, but one of the very few games that Marco has relegated Emil Smith Rowe to the bench was the City game. And I do wonder if there is an element of how Fulham are going to try and play against Arsenal that will look to mirror that in terms of what we're doing. So I suppose that's really the only question about what happens, but I think he'll start him against his former club. I think you're right. I think he'll give him the pep talk, be like, this is your chance, go and prove a point, make your name, and have it. So I'll be very surprised if he doesn't start Smith Rowe, unless I suppose he feels that something's off slightly mentally or something.
And then Muniz, probably?
I think Raul will start. Muniz did well. But I do think that there is an element of, look what Raul did last year against Arsenal. It was probably his best game in the entire season across the course of it. And not just because he scored, but his link-up play was beautiful. And actually, the way that Fulham operated in that game, I thought was very, very sharp. I don't think Raul's done anything to lose the shirt. I think that might be a similar one to Tete and Castagna. The only thing is that obviously Muniz did really well and battled really hard. But I don't think that Fulham are going to win the aerial battle against William Saliba. So by that metric, you kind of come to that point and you think, well, can you beat him in a slightly different way? Can you have your striker dropping off and linking up? Is that the way you get around Arsenal? I don't know on that one. I think it's probably 50-50. And maybe it depends on, when we find out exactly where the Arsenal fitness checks are on certain players and who's available in that back line and who isn't, because it was a slightly patched up job against Manchester United. Zinchenko played, Kivior played in there as well. So whatever that looks like and where those injury reports come in, I imagine Marco will look at them and try to shift around, in the same kind of sense. But I think that one up top is a bit of a, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Yeah, 100%. Well, look, it's a 2:00 kickoff on Sunday. It's part of a double London derby header that Sky is bigging up. Fingers crossed. We were the ones that put a real kind of dent in Arsenal's title ambitions last year. Let's hope we can go and do the same, because it was certainly one of the big highlights of well, it was this year. It was New Year's Eve, wasn't it? So
New Year's Eve, yeah.
Yeah, it was the last day of 2023. Hopefully we can get one in 2024. I think last thing, Jack, to discuss quickly, finish. Chelsea away on Boxing Day. There's quite a lot of consternation amongst the fan base this morning at Fulham's decision to put this one on sale without loyalty points. Surely, probably, other than maybe Bournemouth because of the reduced allocation, you'd have thought the most in-demand game of the season, Chelsea away, particularly on Boxing Day when a lot of people could make it. For me, actually, it's a killer it being on Boxing Day because I'm not around on Boxing Day. But for lots of people, it's a must attend. Bit weird from the club. I mean, I'm sure that the Supporters Trust will ask them why they did this. Maybe there's a logical reason in terms of ticket deliveries and things like that. But to just have the free for all is a mistake that Fulham have made before and seems a bizarre one. Loyalty points aren't perfect. I've kind of said this a lot, that I don't love the system and I think it isn't 100% fair, but it's still fairer than just having a free for all, surely.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. I was on there at 10 a.m. and I've got 2 tickets, and I feel very pleased with myself for doing that. But there is this kind of sense that I'm not 100% sure why they've decided to do that. I wonder if it's something to do with there being complaints about the fact that the same people get to go year on, year out. But that's how loyalty points work, right? That's how you build up your allocations. You build up your opportunities to go to these kind of games. So I really don't know.
I bet you it's a Christmas post related. We only just got the tickets. I bet that will be the reason. That is my hunch. But even so, like, how hard is it to have one day where, even if you the brackets aren't quite as staggered as they normally are, where it goes down in increments of 100, maybe if it's even just if you have 500 plus, you get the first dibs or something like that. Like, it does seem to just be someone that has never been to an away game has suddenly got the same rights as someone that's been to every Fulham game for 25 years. Just what?
I wonder if it's something to do with that weird flaw in the system where if you were 1,000 points and it got to you, you could buy a ticket, and then when it got to 900 points, you could buy another one. I wonder if that flaw has been exposed, and therefore they're the people in the top bracket are just buying them all, which is fine because they're in the top bracket and they've earned their space in that space. But I wonder if that is the reason that they've kind of stopped. We've not really seen it that much this season, have we? It's not been loads. Spurs is the only one.
Yeah, and worked well. I had to wait, to get my dad a ticket because he's got less than me and stuff. That's as much as I think that the whole system needs a shake up, because I do think that people were given points donkeys years ago, basically just because they've got season tickets and have never been to an away. I do think there needs to be some element of merit of away games you've been to. But the whole concept of loyalty points is, as I say, even if it's in its current guise, which isn't right, is surely better than right now, which feels a little bit mad. Anyway, thought we'd quickly address that. Not too much more to say on the matter. Jack, what was your favourite 3-word review that came in? What would you like to name this podcast? Hopefully we go for a different name than the other 2 last week that got given basically the same name. Avast looking at you for that small admin error.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Random Fulham Stuff's O'Reilly O'Reilly is absolutely sensational, but I don't think it's a great name for a podcast. So I'm going to actually instead give the love to Alex Iwobi, and we're going to run with Patrick Brown's Iwobi Wonder Kenobi.
Lovely. Very, very good. I thought you were going to call it Don't Shoot just after.
I wanted to call it Exterminating the Seagulls, but it wasn't actually one of the 3-word reviews. So here we are.
We might get the RSPCA on our case as well if we name it that. Jack, thank you very much as ever.
Thank you very much, Sammy. Always a pleasure.
Myself and Jack will be back on the Thursday Club next week. George will be here. The pod will be released Monday evening, Tuesday morning, something like that. Looking back at the Arsenal game, and then we'll be back this time next week to look ahead to our trip to Anfield. The tough trips, the tough games keep on coming for Fulham, but fingers crossed we can spring a bit of a shock this weekend. You Whites.
You Whites.